Hello, my name is Teal and I'm one of the authors of the book Empirical Development Economics that you can see on the shelf behind me. Now what I'd like to do in this short introductory video is to explain how the book approaches the subject of development economics. Development economics is a very large subject and it deals with a very important question, which is, at its core, why do we observe the very large differences in income that we do, both across countries and within countries? What I want to do in the next few minutes is to focus on the differences in income across countries, and to use that question, why do they differ so much, to illustrate how the book seeks to address it. Now, there's lots of ways you could tackle that question, but one is to look at the data for the whole of the economy. Now, when we try and compare countries like the US, the UK, Sweden with countries like India and the countries of sub-Saharan Africa, we have a problem, which is that they produce very different things. They produce different goods, and they have very different resources, very different levels of labour, very different levels of skills, very different levels of capital. So if we want to say, well, why are some countries so much richer than another, we need a way of comparing both those outputs that the countries produce and the very different inputs that they use to produce those outputs. Now, how do we go about doing that? Well, economists are very brave, or at least some of them are, and what they've done is they have added up all the different outputs that these countries produce, and they've produced an aggregate number. And that aggregate number, it's called GDP, but what it tells you is what the total amount of output in those countries are. And other economists, equally brave, have measured the inputs. Measuring population, that's relatively easy. Measuring skills, that's a bit more difficult. Measuring capital, that's a bit more difficult still. But if you can do that, then you've got comparable data across countries where you can compare the differences in income, and you can look at how many resources in terms of those inputs that those countries have. And armed with that data, you can then pose the question, well, why do some countries produce so much more income than others? And you might think the answer to that was rather obvious. They've got a lot rich countries, they've got a lot more resources, they've got more skilled labour, they've got more capital. Now, when economists are posing that question, they've got, as it were, a preliminary question to address, which is, well, how do I go about linking all those inputs with that output? And to do that, it's called a production function. You've got what is essentially a mapping or a rule which tells you so many inputs produce so much output. And when you ask, well, do different levels of inputs explain the very different levels of output? The answer turns out to be no. And that's a puzzle. And this is the puzzle, the question, that we tackle right at the beginning of the book. What explains the relationship between those inputs and the output? And what we do is we present two possible answers as to why resources by themselves don't explain the different levels of output. Now, one method of doing this, or one answer to the question, is that it's the efficiency with which those inputs are used. That has a name, it's called total factor productivity. What that means is that some countries, taking those inputs, produce much more output than other countries with, in principle, the same level of inputs. In other words, what we need to understand is why some countries are so much better at using the inputs they have than other countries. Now, I haven't, except in passing, mentioned skills. And you'd think that, well, the different levels of skills in these economies, surely that's absolutely crucial. Well, if you think the answer is total factor productivity, then no, skills don't matter or aren't the crucial factor. But again, you won't be surprised to learn that economists come up with more than one answer to any given question. And another argument which has been advanced is that it's not in fact total factor productivity, or at least not in the form that I've just presented it. It's that some countries are much more effective at using the skilled labour they have than others. In other words, it's not the difference in the skill levels in terms of the average years of education, say, that the countries have. It's that rich countries are much, much better at getting output from their skilled labour than are poor countries. Now, those are two radically different explanations. One says, well, skills may play some role, but it's not central. The other explanation says skills are absolutely central to us understanding the answer to that question. Now, what we do in the book, and it's how we try and approach all questions, is not by telling you which of those is the correct answer, but by giving you the data and covering the statistical methods that you need to give a reasonably robust answer to the questions, and ask you, as the user of that data, to assess which of those you think are the more likely answer. And that's the key to the approach we take in the book. Not telling you what the answer is, but giving you the means to answer the question. And whether you're a student, whether you're a teacher in this area, whether you're a researcher, or whether you're a professional, we hope that you will find the book useful because it covers a wide range of techniques and addresses a wide range of questions which, working in development, you want an answer to. And in future videos, what I hope to do is to show you exactly how we go about that in for different questions. But I very much hope that you will find the book useful and that you will be able to find in it the means of answering questions that are absolutely central to the really big questions we face today. And you couldn't have a bigger question than why some countries are so much richer than others. Thank you.